Today we're going to talk about tribalism. So I've been playing City Skylines 2 a lot lately, and it's interesting how the city building game community has some really fierce opinions about specific things related to cities and related to city building games. One of the things that I've noticed in the City Skylines 2 community is that they tend to be generally more liberal-minded people, probably to some degree because many of them are European. And as a result of this, they have the attitude that cities should be built around mass transit and wide roads, big parking lots, the American style of car-centric infrastructure is offensive or politically immoral in some way. So if somebody builds a city in this game with a focus on large freeways and ample parking spaces for cars, things like that, you'll start to see other players trolling them, saying it's basically a sign of essentially American arrogance to create cities which are in some way not pedestrian friendly, or maybe not centered around buses and other forms of mass transit. Now, I'm not going to weigh in too much on that one way or the other, but I think it's interesting how a game which is just about building cities, it's not a political thing, will devolve into people trolling and roasting each other for perceived political differences because of how they built a fake city in a video game. Now, another thing that I've noticed in this community that they share is a general hatred for the 2013 release of SimCity 5. There's a lot of reasons why people were less than happy with the release of SimCity 5. And many of those were opinions I share. And they were valid. The game released in an always online state. That bothered people, probably rightfully so, especially in the climate of 2013. And the game also released with prohibitively small maps. So it was a game about building a city, but you didn't have any room to build a city in. If you tried to create your hometown, you'd have no way of doing it. If you tried to create your neighborhood in your hometown, the map would still be probably too small even to do that. So players were frustrated. They said, well, in some ways this is a cool game, but what's the point of a city building game which gives us maps that are so small you can't even fit a small town on them? So all of that, now in the distant past, new city building games have come, and the city building genre is actually in a very good place now, comparatively. There's a lot to choose from, but players still harbor that old feeling of resentment toward the former SimCity franchise and the way that game was handled. So on the Facebook group for the City Skylines 2 community, somebody posted something about SimCity 2013. And I posted something to the effect of, It wasn't a perfect game, but in many ways, it looked very good, and it was a amazing game from an art style perspective. If you discount some of the significant problems that it also had. I'm not saying that the game was perfect by any measure, but I'm also not going to tell you that it was a terrible game in every way. There were some aspects of it which I enjoyed. And then I was looking at this post I had made and realizing a lot of people were kind of starting to hate on the post I'd made. Essentially giving off the vibe of how dare you say that that game was good. Because you see, the consensus is that that game was bad. And now, years later, it's taboo to dare say anything good about it. Because the community has come to the conclusion that the game was bad. It was the face of bad. It is the spiritual embodiment of evil. So if you dare to say anything good about it, it's basically like going out into the parking lot of your nearest church, drawing a pentagram and worshiping Satan there. That's basically how they feel about it. And this video is not really about the state of city building games. The point I'm making here is that no matter where you go, people will start to find opportunities to take things which could be neutral and make them an excuse for tribalism. And so in society, we have people that are divided on partisan lines over politics. Who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, who's a Christian, who's an agnostic. And then it gets more nuanced from there. But the example I'm providing illustrates how it's not just the big ticket issues, not just the things that show up on the evening news, not just the things that we all know are extremely divisive. It's the little things too. Because the truth is, divisive people will find an opportunity to be divisive, no matter where you put them. If you eliminate all of the big rocks, all of the things that people say are ripping apart our society, and you left just a simple, good, problem-free life for everyone, there is a vocal subset of people who would still find a way to manufacture problems and to go at each other's throats. The truth is, there's people who have problems and there's people who don't. And while some things are affected by external factors, the greatest part of your experience in life is very much dependent not on external factors, but on your perspective. If I told you you have only one day left to live, you'd have two choices. You'd either live a better life for that last day because you'd want to make that last day the best day of your life, or you would just throw it away because you would say, it's all for nothing. The point I'm getting at here is, it's not about whether you win or lose, it's about the perspective you have in life. And some people are just naturally negative. They're negative toward their own lives. They're negative toward other people. And the truth is, that's connected, because if you are negative about your own life, you're also going to be negative toward other people. You're never going to find someone who doesn't value their own life but also believes other people have value and treats them in a way that makes them feel valued. People who don't feel valued don't value other people. They tend to think, well, if my life sucks, then why should I care if other people's lives suck? So, where are we going with this? I guess it all boils down to the fact that you should be a peacemaker and not a troublemaker. And you should avoid associating with people who have the attitude of wanting to stir the pot and cause drama. Because no matter how much you try to appease people who have a problem with just about everybody and everything that they encounter in life, you're never going to appease them. Because it's like running a race where the terms of victory, the finish line always keeps getting moved. The rules of the game always change. So even if you somehow win by playing by the rules will just change at the last minute so that you aren't winning after all. People who tell you that you are the source of all of their problems, that their life would be better if you just did something different, if you just didn't cause them trouble or anguish or problems, if you just agreed with them, then we would be okay. You can agree with them. You can give them what they want. They're just going to want something else. Because people who are dissatisfied will always be dissatisfied. People who already have an ethos that enough isn't enough, they'll never be satisfied no matter how much they get. So if you want peace in your life, you really just have to tune out those kind of people. It's also important, though, to understand that that doesn't represent everyone out there. And there is a vocal minority of people who kind of speak for the entire crowd. And if you're not careful, you can become cynical because you think, well, everyone seems to be sort of crazy. And the truth is, it's not that everyone is crazy. It's that there's a few crazy people who speak out more loud than anyone else, and then you judge everyone on a basis of their actions. I think it's important not to trust people too much. It's also important not to be so cynical that you don't believe in the fundamental good of others. But it's also important to create an environment that is conducive to camaraderie instead of harmful, toxic competition that benefits one person disproportionately at the expense of others. To illustrate this, let's think about different types of competitive games. For example, World of Warships. It's a game I've played. The people there are usually pretty friendly. They get along pretty well. And the reason for this is because every match, it's not a 1v1. It's a group of people playing together as a team against another equally matched team. And furthermore, the people who you play with in a match right now are very likely going to become people who you match with as opponents in the future. So there's a strong motivation and incentive to treat the people on the other side with a level of respect as equals, because ultimately, sooner or later, you'll all be on the same team. So while it is a match of skill, it's not about putting one person ahead at the expense of the respect of others. Meanwhile, there's other games where perhaps there is a significant power difference between players. Pay-to-win games, for example. Albion Online comes to mind. It's a game where a person who has better gear has a better chance of destroying another player with less gear. It's all about celebrating inequality in that game. And so the game tends to be much more toxic because people get ahead by playing dirty. So it's important sometimes not just to avoid people who are toxic, but also to avoid the environments which breed toxic behavior. I was reading an article about EVE Online, and I'll always remember the article. I don't know how true it is, but certainly it was one of those things you remember. Someone was writing about how fundamentally sexist and toxic the player base of EVE Online is. EVE Online being a sandbox, full loot PvP spaceship MMO. And I believe it, because it is, again, very much like Albion Online in the sense that it celebrates inequality, and it's an environment where there's very little to do in the game other than try to make money and get ahead by any means necessary. So instead of it being a free world where you can chart any path, create any course for your character, it winds up being a chase to see how much you can get the number to go up, how much money you can earn by getting ahead at the expense of other people. So it's not really a surprise that a lot of the people, not all of them by any measure, but many of the people who play the game are probably people who are a little bit toxic, a little bit inclined to try to get ahead in unscrupulous ways. People who will kick someone while they're down and then dance on their grave. So the question is, why would I want to play that game? Why would I want to pay for future years a subscription to a game which is filled with and incentivizes players who are the kind of people who probably tend to be toxic and unkind? That's one reason why I like The Elder Scrolls Online. I'll tell you right now, it's not the best game in many ways, but I like it because it has a good diversity of different kinds of players. There's old people, young people, men, women, people of all different political views tend to play the game. It's got a good diversity in the player base of all different kinds of people. Chances are, regardless of what your lifestyle or demographic is, you're probably not playing alone in Elder Scrolls Online. There's someone out there who shares a similar perspective. Meanwhile, in some other games, you'll find the demographic population is a lot less balanced. Games that don't offer a diversity of different types of content tend to lack diversity in their player base, because if all you have is full loot PvP, you probably are going to wind up mostly attracting just the main demographic that likes full loot PvP games. So you wind up with fewer women. You wind up with more people who have a certain personality type that's probably in the territory of toxic. So in that case, it's not really the fault of the people. It's the fault of the game design. And that's also true in life. It's true in life that sometimes it's not about finding the right kind of people as much as it is finding the right kind of environment. And if you surround yourself with things which are conducive to being uplifting, things which are going to encourage collaboration, cooperation, camaraderie, then you wind up with more people who share those values too. And that's one reason why I tend to back out of some games sometimes, not because the game is bad, but because the community doesn't give me the vibe that that's what I want to associate with. It's amazing how much of a difference it makes in terms of longevity and wanting to stick with something when you feel like the other people who play the game or the other people who are doing the thing that you are part of also share similar values. That actually, I think, is more important than game design. You know, I've said this before in reference to work, and that is that people will volunteer for an organization that they believe in and enjoy. And they will do that for years. Maybe it's a food bank, something like that. Because they believe in the people that are there, they believe in the cause, and it's not about the money. And then you can go conversely into the world and look at employers who struggle with turnover, and maybe people will leave because they don't feel like they have a good experience. And maybe they're paid well, maybe they're compensated very well for the job that they do, but they don't feel like they share values with the people they work with. They don't feel respected. They don't have a good experience. And so they leave a job that pays well because they don't have a good experience and they don't feel like the environment is uplifting. But those same people might donate their time and their money to something that actually makes them feel valued. So whether we're talking about a game, or we're talking about an online community, or we're talking about a workplace or a relationship, it all comes back to that notion of it's not about what you do, it's about how you make people feel. And people will forget the things you accomplish, but they will remember how you made them feel. And so look for things that pass the vibe check. That's what I'm saying. Don't look for what's procedurally the best. Look for what's spiritually the best. And if you find something which is spiritually uplifting, then it probably also is going to pass certain basic standards of design. And if you find something which is designed well, it probably is going to also have a positive impact in your life. It's all about finding moderation, something which makes you want to be the best version of yourself. And if something doesn't inspire you to be the best version of yourself, probably cut it out. If it's filled with people who don't seem like they are doing what's right, you probably should just stay away from the organization entirely, or stay away from the game entirely. Like it's totally true probably that the folks who are hardcore Call of Duty players aren't going to be the same kind of players as the folks who play Stardew Valley, right? So not all games are created equal. The best way to avoid toxic people is to find games that reward kindness instead of cruelty. Finally, sometimes, no matter where you go, you're going to find a few bad apples. You'll find a few people who are just troublemakers, the people who stir the pot. And in those cases, I think it's important to remember that one voice doesn't represent the entire crowd. Don't judge the entirety of a thing on a basis of one bad experience. But if you start to have too many bad experiences, then you probably should rethink the path that you are investing in. Always try to find things to do that are uplifting, things that are encouraging, things that give you the opportunity to make yourself feel better and hopefully make other people feel better along the way. Good luck on your adventure. Till next time. Thanks for watching.